Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it may happen to be. Welcome to another weekly word. Today's devotional is coming from the book of 2 Samuel chapter 24, verses 18 and following. And we're entering into the midst of a story where King David has asked Joab, the commander of the armies, to enroll or to count all the men of fighting capability in his country, which was contrary to what God had commanded previously. It was a great sin where instead of putting his trust in his Lord, he was going to be putting his trust in the number of men he could put swords in the hands of. Anyway, God gives him three choices as to the punishment that there's going to be. David chooses a plague of 3 days. And God relents at the end of this and stops the angel of the Lord at a location called the threshing floor of Araunah. And so on that day, Gad, verse 18, Gad, the seer of the Lord for David. On that day, Gad went to David and said to him, "Go up and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite." So David went up, as the Lord had commanded, through Gad. When Araunah looked and saw the king and his officials coming toward him, he went out and bowed down before the king with his face to the ground. Araunah said, "Why has my lord the king come to his servant?" "To buy your threshing floor," David answered, "so I can build an altar to the Lord, that the plague on the people may be stopped." Araunah said to David, "Let my lord the king take whatever he wishes and offer it up. Here are oxen for the burnt offering, and here are threshing sledges and ox yokes for the wood. Your majesty, Araunah gives all this to the king." Araunah also said to him, "May the Lord your God accept you." But the king replied to Araunah, "No, I insist on paying you for it. I will not sacrifice to the Lord my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing." So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen and paid 50 shekels of silver for them. David built an altar to the Lord there and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then the Lord answered his prayer in behalf of the land, and the plague on Israel was stopped. Now, before you think I'm going someplace where I'm not suggesting that we find a threshing floor, build an altar, and sacrifice some oxen on it so this pandemic would stop. I'm not going there at all. It's not the point of today's devotional by any means. The point is my favorite verse that David ever says. And he says a lot of things. He replies to Araunah, "No, I insist on paying you for it. I will not sacrifice to the Lord my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing." It's a challenge. Most people that I encounter, not just at North Park, but most people that I encounter, period, view religion as a way of getting something. Whatever that may be. It may be peace of mind. It may be a path forward, a sense of meaning and purpose in life. It may be an eternal home in heaven. It may be an escape from the fires of hell. It may be any number of things. But they view their relationship to God as primarily one way. They pray to God, and if God hears, they get something. I want to posit today that worship is only worship when it's sacrificial. Worship is only worship when it costs you something. Is the Lord your God someone that you're wanting to get stuff from? Sure, absolutely. All of us, even Christ himself, teaching his disciples how to pray, said, "Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." Right? So there's nothing wrong with asking or having this reciprocity in the relationship. But you can't worship a God you're unwilling to sacrifice for. In fact, I would say this is the greatest reason for giving financially to the work of the church. The ministry the church does is important, absolutely. So funding that becomes an important thing. But here we see the king, who could have demanded everything of Hyrcanus, could have just taken it, because ultimately, legally, it was all his anyway as the king. Short of that, Hyrcanus had offered it to him absolutely for free. Here, you can do the sacrifice. You can worship the Lord your God just as he commanded you to do, and it won't cost you anything. And some may have seen that as a blessing of the Lord, as a windfall from God himself, as God's hand of approval on King David. But David saw to the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter is, worship is never worship until it costs you something. Do you worship God? Most people would answer yes if they go to church and sing songs of praise. Most people would say not so much if they don't have much to do with Christianity at all, or don't go to church. Or some would say, well, I worship God best in nature. And so I have a lot of friends that go hunting, and they talk about the woods as their church. Really? What did that cost you? I mean, sure, the climbing tree stand probably cost you $250 to $400, and the gun is certainly not a cheap thing, and all that camouflage clothing, my goodness, you can buy a 3-piece suit 2 to 3 times over if you get Sitka or Kuiu or First Light Gear. And if you're not familiar with those names, just consider it to be posh camouflage. But you're just doing what you wanted to do. Now, you can attest to the fact of the beauty of nature, and you can realize that God made it, sure. But what did it cost you? To worship is to place something above yourself. And at least for the human condition currently in a fallen world, the best way to truly worship is to sacrifice to God. Now, in the Old Testament, that usually involved, well, in this passage, oxen, and laying them dead upon the altar and burning them and giving them as an incense before God. What sacrifice does God desire? Obedience. In fact, it says that our God desires obedience more than worship. More than sacrifice, I should say. What sacrifice does he want? He wants you to sacrifice your will and to take up his instead. He wants you to be obedient. That's the worship that God desires. Obedience. I'm not sure what God has been calling you to do. I'm not sure what he's challenging you with now. I'm not sure what you're supposed to do, but I do know this, that if you truly want to worship God, if you want to place him above yourself, give him preeminence in your life, then the best way to do that is to obey him. I hope this is illuminating to you and a little bit challenging for you. And I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful day as you contemplate how to worship your God and King. And most importantly, what should you be doing today to obey him who you have claimed to be your liege Lord? May our great God and King bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may you know at the end of this day, as you lay your head down to rest, that you have been obedient and thereby have worshiped your God. Thank you. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night.